In less than a month, the entire American Athletic Conference will converge on Dickies Arena in Fort Worth. We are less than a month away from the end of the basketball regular season and then moving into the postseason. As we welcome you into All-American here in Studio A alongside the great Maria Trivelpiece. I'm Kyle Youmans. Glad you're with us. Today we're talking women's hoops. We've got plenty to get to, including some of the standings early on. And we've talked about it a couple weeks in a row on this show. But what UTSA, South Florida, and North Texas have been doing at the top of this conference is still yet to be touched. These are the three-headed monster that the American has put to the table, and all three have a chance to not only make some noise in Fort Worth, but possibly go dancing afterwards.
I know, and the thing that that's really exciting for me is the fact that these three teams are playing some of their best basketball right now. We saw South Florida falter a little bit early in conference play. They look incredibly dominant right now. UTSA has never really faltered. They've just been at the top that entire time. And of course, North Texas has been so stellar. We're going to talk more about them later on today. But those three have really been great this entire American Conference season.
And, of course, as we've seen in the past, you cannot count anyone out whenever it comes
Absolutely
to
not.
tournament time.
Nope.
There's a lot of teams still in the mix. I mean, Rice was a team that was picked to finish tied for second in the preseason poll, and they're on the right side of that graphic. East Carolina's been to the tournament championship game in each of the last 2 years, winning one of those. They're starting to play some better basketball, have some tests ahead of time. We're going to touch a lot of this as we go on through the next hour, but we've got to talk about UTSA. This is still a team that is leading the way in the American Conference and putting up some incredible numbers as one of the top four teams, no matter what happens the rest of the way.
Their ticket is punched. Also, shout out to whoever made that graphic, because we love a good graphic and social post, but they're going to head to the quarterfinals. They clinched that spot with their victory this past week. So the Roadrunners running right into March. How about that?
I like it. And I like how you can talk about that as a top four seed. You get not one, but two buys to go into the quarters and finish in that top 8 teams in the American. So it is important to be one of the top 4 teams. It pays to have some success in the regular season, and they've definitely done that.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about their success, but we thought we would do it with someone who has been covering this team the entire season. So welcome to All-American, Carlie Heineman, the women's basketball analyst at UTSA. We are so excited to have you here to chat all things Roadrunners.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I'm always ready and willing to talk UTSA women's basketball. Let's do it.
Sounds kind of like their team, right? Always ready for the challenge at hand, according to UTSA and Karen Aston across the board.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way they've been able to just stay at the top, like Maria said, the entire conference season in a really difficult conference says a lot.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Talk to us about how much they've grown throughout the year. I mean, this is a team that, of course, going into it was picked 5th out of the 13 teams in the American. We've talked about Jordan Jenkins and some of the other key role players in that building, but what's the general feel around the program as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's really easy to talk about Jordan Jenkins, and we should. She's a superstar. I think she's had a fantastic season. Yeah. Definitely made a case for Player of the Year, but I try to hammer home on the broadcast, and I think more people are starting to see that Jordan Jenkins is not the whole team, that there are plenty of role players and just other players on this team that have come in. They're capable scorers. They get it done on the defensive end, rebounding, the veteran leadership. It's really just a collective effort that's supplemented by, amazing play by Jordan Jenkins.
You talk about some of that veteran leadership. When you look at some of the older players on that roster, who is it to you that stands out to you night after night and maybe isn't even getting some of that credit because of all the success that Jordan Jenkins has had?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to just pick out one player. I think just in the starting lineup alone, we have to give a ton of credit to Sydney Love and Nina DeLeon-Negron. What a luxury that Coach Karen Aston has to have essentially 2 point guards on the floor at the same time that can kind of calm the team down, get them into their offense. And, on the flip side, they're both really strong defenders. So I think that's a huge luxury. And then Idara Udo on the inside is the anchor. She's had 5 double-doubles on the year. She's super consistent, just a sophomore, but she's a vocal leader. And then to round out the starting lineup, you have Maya Linton, who doesn't score a whole lot, but she is that defensive presence. She, takes on the task of guarding the opposing team's best player night in and night out, and she's just a dog. Like, she's going to get it done on the defensive end. So that whole starting five to me is so strong. And then you've got players coming off the bench, and I'm probably talking too much, but I got to give credit to Asia Proctor. She had a monster game against Memphis coming off the bench. Players like Cheyenne Rowe coming in, contributing in that post position as well. So I think UTSA across the board just has really strong contributors.
Well, Carlie, I think that you can never talk too much because you're talking to two of the culprits who do that way beyond the people
true.
in the back like us too. But, you mentioned the success that this team has had as a whole. So you talk about the starters, you talk about the bench players, and we've slowly seen in Karen Aston's tenure at UTSA this growing, right? Every year just getting a little bit better. Picked 5th in the preseason poll, so still people not totally buying in to what this program had to offer. What do you think it is about this season that just things started to click?
Well, I think I'm going to use something that Coach Aston has said to me, and she said it in press conferences herself, is that these players are kind of growing up. And I think in a world where the transfer portal is so huge and, there's not a lot of continuity with rosters, some coaches don't know, who's going to be on their team next year. I think Coach Aston has done a fantastic job of cultivating a really strong culture here that players want to be here. And you see returners that have been here for 2, 3, 4 years that are contributing. So that kind of gelling and that chemistry, I think, has kind of helped set UTSA above the rest, and that these players are used to playing with each other. They know what Coach Aston expects, and they've really ingratiated themselves into the system.
No, I think you could bring up a great point. I'm looking at the list of players that returned from last year. Of course, you have Jenkins, who's kind of leading the way, but then Udo is a returner. Proctor, Love, Coleman, Linton, Rowe, all of these players have been around for more than one season. And in a year or in a day and age, really, when you do have to kind of combine your returners with the transfer portal and trying to mesh your roster together, why is Karen Aston such a weapon in an era like this? Because she's not only brought those players back, but she's filled the void in other ways to help this team only to 3 losses so far.
Yeah, no, just from my own perspective in dealing with Coach Aston, she takes care of her people. And so when you have a coach, and speaking from as a former player, when you have a coach who really believes in you, who wants to see you get better, who pours into you, you're going to want to stay around that. So she's been able to keep those strong players who probably could have gone other places. I mean, the transfer portal's huge. You see players jumping in there every year, but these players choose to be here. And then, like you said, she's been able to supplement that. Like Nina DeLeon-Negron, I think, is one of the most impactful transfers in the conference, just coming in and being able to fit into the system so seamlessly and just add to what has already been here at UTSA. I think that's just unparalleled.
Since you brought her up, DeLeon-Negron and what she brings from a facilitation standpoint is tremendous. She shares the rock. They have great ball movement. It's very fluid on the offensive side of the floor. But when she needs to, she can step up and hit some shots. And she's done that throughout. Think about what she did against Memphis, 16 points. Tulsa, she put up 19 points. She can still knock it down. What's the versatility that she brings to the offensive side, and how can that continue to elevate this team?
I think Nina does a really, really good job of reading the flow of the game and recognizing what the team needs. If maybe the ball's not going through the basket, she can take it off the dribble, off of a pick and roll, and get to the rim herself. Yeah. If someone is shooting well, like Asia Proctor had a monster game, 15 points against Memphis, she's going to feed her the ball. So I think Nina does a great job of recognizing what the team needs and then providing that, whether that's getting into the paint and kicking it out to shooters, dropping it down to Adara Udo or Jordan Jenkins, or sometimes taking it upon herself to take those threes or get to the rim, draw fouls. I think she's just her basketball IQ is very high.
Now, Carlie, you've talked about so many individual players, and you've been covering this that's what we wanted you to do, though, so we appreciate it very much so. But when you look at this team as a whole and you look at the way that they've been playing the entire year, but especially right now, what is it going to take for them to just bring it all home in that conference tournament? What is the final step to this big puzzle that Karen has been putting together?
I honestly think it's just staying consistent on the defensive end. I think UTSA's defense has been just so stifling for most of conference play. I mean, they're holding teams to 56 points in a conference where there's a lot of talented players in this conference, teams that can score at a high clip. UTSA has been able to hold people to 56 points, and I believe 37% field goal defense. It's just that is what has won them games. You can't always control if the ball is going through the basket, but you can control how hard you play on the defensive end and how locked in you are to the scout. And I think when UTSA is completely locked in defensively and they work as a unit, I don't know if there's a team that can beat them. They're just so strong on the defensive end in the half court. And even we've seen them full court press, just make it really difficult. So I think as long as they continue to hang their hats on defense like they have been, I think that's really what's going to propel them even through March.
Defense wins championships, so we'll have to see if that adage works for the Roadrunners. Carlie Heineman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Anytime y'all want me, I'm here. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Thank you again.
Thank y'all.
So as we continue to kind of talk about all of these different elements and across the board when it comes to the American, yes, UTSA is still setting the standard. Yes, they are still the best team, at least right now in the conference, but they're not far and away by themselves. They've got teams in the rearview mirror, one of which is South Florida, that's playing just an incredible brand of basketball right now.
Puisis or Levy would be your main hope. Here's Puisis, open look, good! Overtime coming. Sammie Puisis ties it up just before the buzzer. Dembele controls. You see the clock. Puisis from long range hits the three for South Florida. Sammie Puisis hesitated, took the shot, put the Bulls up three. She was way behind the arc.
Not one, but two ice-cold drills of a three ball by Sammie Puisis. We already knew Sammie as one of the best shooters in the conference. We didn't realize that the ice-cold blood runs through her veins like that. Not only was it a big-time three, look at where she shoots this ball. This is a logo three where she jab steps a defender, still had an arm in her face, and then absolutely drills it in the third overtime over a first-team all-conference preseason opponent. Amiya Fisher just drills it to win it for South Florida in a tightly contested three-overtime bout against Rice. I watched the back end of this game. I was just finishing up a North Texas Memphis game that we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. And we were watching, and Coach Burton was right next to me. A couple of North Texas fans were right next to me, and we were watching the end of this game, and all of us were just cheering because of how crazy the game ended up being. And even Coach Burton walked away after the first buzzer beater. He's like, "No, I can't watch this." So it was an incredible game, and Puisis just continues to do her thing. South Florida doing their thing as a whole.
Well, there was one part of that clip if you go back and watch it, after she makes that first three, you see her teammates celebrating around her and hugging her. She's unfazed. Like, there's no, like, stone cold. She's not excited. She's just there because the job's not done yet, right? Like, there's still an overtime to be played. And I think when you go back and you look at that clip in that one instance, that just defines who she is as a player, and that's one of the reasons she is as good as she is. Sammie Puisis has something to prove right now. She's coming back from that injury, and all season long she's been fighting that and saying, hey, look, I'm still very good at basketball, and I still have a lot of unfinished business here at South Florida, and she is just elevating this team every single week. I was also on a game during at that time, and I was like checking the updates. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's in the third overtime. It's still going on. But yeah, she has something to prove. You could take a look at that right there. Just the numbers that she's been putting up has been insane. Yeah,
South Florida is another team that, of course, we talked about at the beginning of the season as a legitimate threat in the American and a threat to make the tournament. And we're starting to see that again, currently listed as one of the first four out according to bracketology. They can very easily climb their way back into the fold there. That quad one win against Duke earlier in the campaign is what's kind of helping them in that regard, because they're 1-5 in quad one, they're 0-1 in quad two, and the net ranking isn't necessarily sensational, but Sammie Puisis is sensational. Jose Fernandez has the overarching reputation of being sensational. So they have that element of their team. And if they have a high-end player like Puisis stepping up in the big moments, why not? Why not South Florida make a run here and to not only put themselves in position prior to the tournament, but during the tournament to possibly go dancing?
Yeah, because they have that. As we just watched Sammie Puisis do what she does, and we've also seen this team, I think for me, is also clicking and peaking at the right time. I've talked about it a lot, but they stumbled at different points throughout this season, earlier in conference play, and I call it a stumble. It's not really a stumble, but I just always expect them to go undefeated in the American because of what Jose Fernandez has done in Tampa. But I think you have Sammie Puisis, but then you also have other players contributing as well, and I think that combination of other players, of a sensational Sammie, of peaking at the right time, is that perfect combination heading into March.
Laura Puisis has stepped up in a big, big way. You talk about double-double machine. She's been one of the better players to average double figures for a team, and she's only one of two players on the team, along with Puisis, that averages up over 10 points per game. So she's been really a rebounding, a post presence, a defensive presence. She's had some tough matchups against teams like North Texas and teams like UTSA that are up there at the top of the standings along with South Florida. But now she's gotten one back against North Texas and Tommisha Lampkin in a game where they put a couple of the North Texas bigs in some trouble with the fouls early on. She can be dynamic as a scorer, and if she's scoring and shooting the ball well, along with crashing the boards and playing good defense down low, I think Puisis is probably the X factor for the Bulls. But I will say the depth alongside Puisis has been a number one thing that South Florida has kind of hung their hat on, because like I said, only two players average in double figures like Puisis and Puisis. Everybody else just does their job the right way, and I think it's built to win in March. That's what this whole thing has been built around.
And I think it's also that everybody steps up in different games. So if somebody doesn't have it, there's another player that steps up. I know the week that we interviewed Carla Brito, Romy Levy also had a really good game that week. So Brito was good in one game, Levy was good in another game. And so I think one thing that Brito said when we had talked to her was that it's just all about doing your job. And so if you're doing that, if you're getting your rebounds, if you're playing good defense, that's all that you're really focused on from that South Florida team perspective. And you see that playing out in the way that the numbers line up and also the way that this team is winning games, because there's multiple people contributing, maybe not every night, but especially in sports, yes, consistency is key. Sammie Puisis is very consistent, but no matter what, you're going to have a game where you don't play quite as well. If you have other people to step up, Victoria Blazic, we didn't even mention her yet. She's been fantastic as well. And so I think that depth, that combination is going to fare well for the Bulls.
Yeah, I look up and down. We've already talked about almost all of the starting five: Puisis, Blazic, Puisis, Brito, Dembele. You talked about Levy. I mean, they have the American Conference preseason co-player of the year coming off the bench, and she's still playing at a high level.
I think we say that every show.
I know, but that's
so true, though.
That's a
right?
huge point. She's still averaging 8 points per game, and she's doing so in 20 minutes a game. She's not having to play a ton, but when they can give her the rock, they will give her the rock, and she'll continue to showcase that ability to score, play downhill. Really good player overall. So we've talked about the front runners in UTSA, the team that's right in their rearview mirror in South Florida. If the road runners slip up, the Bulls are right there running that direction. Same can be said for North Texas. Yep. The only thing about North Texas is it depends on what type of team you're going to get. And right now, we've seen it over the last couple games. They can score just like they did last year whenever they raised a banner, whatever it is.
Put it in the rafters.
Hung a banner.
I think
back in the day. By being the conference regular season champs a year ago, they are now the top offense in the conference. I don't know if you checked the rankings in terms of offensive points per game. They're now number one. Part of that was because they put up 63 points in the second half against Memphis the other day after they were down at halftime. They were down by 4 going into the break. And this was the second half. They outscored the Tigers 63-21, put up the most amount of points in a conference game for North Texas since 2016. So putting up an unbelievable amount of points and just an offensive explosion. It was actually one of the more dominant performances that I've seen in a conference game in quite some time. Oh, and by the way, they did it the game before against Tulane as well on national television, Super Bowl Sunday, where they outscored Tulane 24-5 in the first quarter.
So you've been on a lot of North Texas games. You were on that game where they scored 63 points
wild.
in the second half. We talked about a lot of wild games that happened on that same day, but I want to ask you, I'll throw it back to you a little bit. When you're looking at that team, the way that this offense seems to be clicking right now, is there something that changed, or is it for you just like, happening well in these last couple of games? Is it something that can continue? What's your analysis of the situation?
So change from last year to this year, or changed as the year has gone on?
Change as the year has gone on.
I don't know if it's changed a ton. I think it's just execution has been better. Because when you look at North Texas as a team, they're built better than they were a year ago. They have two elite on-ball defending guards, and that's Desiree Wooten and Kyla Deck. Now that Deck has been back in the fold for a couple of weeks now, she was out with a concussion for a little bit of time. She can kind of be that rotational guard that they work. But then kind of like what we talked about with South Florida, it's a different person every night. I think the steady hand is Tommisha Lampkin. Lampkin's been the one that has helped set the tone and has been a consistent scorer no matter what, consistent defender no matter what. As long as she stays out of foul trouble, she's one of the top 3 players in this conference, no doubt in my mind. But when you don't have another player step up, you've got another one stepping up. It's a different person every night. It could be Jocelyn Moore. It could be Desiree Wooten. It could be Amiya Johnson. It could be Lampkin just setting the world on fire. She could certainly do so. So it's the depth around this team and the way that they've been built. Jason Burton has talked very highly of this roster. He thinks it's a team that's probably built in a better way. Maybe not as talented, but it's built in a better way than they were built last year. And I believe him. I think if you can have a girl like Johnson, player like Johnson, take the pressure off of Tommisha Lampkin, take the pressure off of Jocelyn Moore by playing good defense and staying out of foul trouble, it helps open things up across the board. When you have the elite defenders like you have with Lampkin in the post and Desiree Wooten on the ball, it completely changes the way that teams are able to attack North Texas.
I mean, you mentioned having other players take the pressure off of Tommisha Lampkin.
Yeah.
I don't even know she needs the pressure taken off of
she
her
can handle it.
based on some of the games that she's played. I think she had 29 against Tulsa. She was the American Conference Player of the Week, so she's playing some of her best basketball, which, again, it's been fantastic this entire season. But I think when you have Tommisha Lampkin able to do that, and then you also have these other players stepping up, that's where it becomes huge. Now, we talked about their offense, to North Texas's offense, but one of the big keys of North Texas basketball has been their defense.
Yeah.
So now you have this balance of the two kind of working hand in hand, and I think this is perfect timing. We talked about South Florida peaking, but how about the Mean Green heading into March, putting up these offensive numbers, but also staying with that defense that they've had the entire year?
Yeah, they're the only team in the American that ranks inside the top 5 of both points per game and opponents' points per game, and that shows balance to me.
Yeah.
That shows a very well-balanced team. Now, they've faltered in a couple of games that you could look at and say maybe you should have won 1 or 2 of these, but I mean a lot of those have just been tough ones. At Tulane was the first one where they fell, and you and I both were on this show and said, okay, that's a big loss. You probably shouldn't have lost that one. But other than that, you lost at South Florida and you lost at UTSA. Both of those games came down to the wire on the road. North Texas is just as good as UTSA, and they are just as good and built well as South Florida. It's just whether or not you can piece it all together. They had a tight matchup with Tulsa last time out. The Golden Hurricane gave them a run all the way down to the wire. We'll talk more about the Golden Hurricane momentarily, but I think if you take the over-encompassing resume of North Texas, they are still, in my opinion, the best built team for March. They might not, like I said, might not be the best talent, because I think you could argue that the best player is on UTSA. You could argue the best talent is on South Florida. But the way this team is built, I don't see another team built better than what Jason Burton has put together in North Texas.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. It's definitely looking like a good situation for the Mean Green. Now, I want to talk about another team that we were pretty high on, but then they faltered a little bit. Now it looks like they're starting to find their rhythm again. That's the Temple Owls. So starting to win some more of those games. They lost the ones that we thought maybe they should have won.
Yeah.
They were at the top of the conference. We thought it's going to go either way. The depth was a big question for both of us with Temple, but it's finally looking like they're
starting to see an uptick.
Yes, exactly.
There you go.
So I'm interested to see where that goes. Now, it's crazy because when I was prepping for this show, I was looking at how many games are left in the season, and the fact that we're this close to March is actually insane. But
it's kind of scary.
It's very scary. I'm a little. I mean, I feel like if I was a player, I'd be more excited, maybe not more nervous, sad and excited.
You're cold-blooded. You would have worked right through it and gone straight to the postseason if you could.
I don't know about that, but anyway, going back to the Temple Owls, they lose to South Florida, which is a game. Okay, that's one maybe we're not gonna hold against you for losing. They're at the top of the conference. They beat UAB. They beat Tulane. Tulane playing some really good basketball. We've talked a lot about the Green Wave in that aspect as well. And so I'm excited to see where this Temple team can go because of the way that they're starting to uptick again. Now, there's still a couple things that they have to clean up, but I'll let you say your piece and then you could come back.
Yeah, they lost the tough ones in the middle. Tulane, North Texas, UTSA, South Florida. We've talked enough about those teams. But they've won the games that they probably should win throughout the course of their season, and they had some revenge against Tulane once they did make the return trip. So it's not just about the depth that I'm excited about and the scoring that we knew Temple could bring. It's about the defense. This defense has taken steps in the right direction. They've been playing better basketball. They're now inside the top 5 in defensive efficiency, and they were in the bottom half of that category going into the last time we recorded a show 2 weeks ago. So that means over the last 3 or 4 games, they've been better on the defensive side of the ball as a whole. And I think a lot of that clicked when they held South Florida, though it wasn't a loss, to 64 points. Something just felt like, and I went back and watched that game, I was like, what changed here? And it was really the rotation of players and the effort on the defensive side. I think finally you saw something just click for the Owls. And in doing so, they held a very talented South Florida team to below their season average. You then allowed 53 points only against UAB in a win. You allowed only 56 points in a win against Tulane. If they can continue to play high-level defense and show that effort and rebounding capability, I mean, my goodness, they rebounded the ball significantly better over those last 2 games against UAB and Tulane as well. Then all of a sudden, I think you're a more dangerous team because we know they can score, but can they rebound and can they play defense? And as you can see here, the history says you will win if you can rebound the basketball.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up that point about defense because when I did the Memphis Temple game earlier this month and we talked to Diane Richardson, I always like to ask coaches, all right, what are your keys to the game? And she just said one word. She said it's defense. And she said, you can ask me that question every single game. I don't care who we're playing. That is what my answer is going to be. She's like, not only defense. And then she expanded on it a little bit because she's great if you ever have a chance to talk to her. She has so much basketball knowledge and she really likes to break things down. But she talked about the rebounding as well. And she actually spoke on a lot of her student athletes who made improvements in their rebounding. And she said one thing was that some of them were almost too nice, right? They would take the basketball and see it and they would just be like, oh, okay, like let me go try to get it instead of boxing out, going as hard as you can into the paint. And she said there's been a big change in that. And that's why they've been able to rebound better because some people are getting a little bit meaner, not in a bad way, in the best basketball way as possible. So meaner Owls are getting the rebounds. They're playing that physical brand of basketball. They're playing good defense. And she talked so much about that being an emphasis, and it's finally showing up in their style of play.
No, I think if you're looking at this conference top to bottom, and you're looking at the teams that we've already mentioned at the top, I think you look at Temple as what are they doing up there? Why are they in the 4th spot in the conference? Are they really that good to try and battle for a straight trip to the quarterfinals? Yes, they're good enough. Yes. They're absolutely good enough. Now, they're going to go down to the wire with Tulane, and I don't think Tulsa's done yet either. We'll talk more about the Golden Hurricane here in a moment. But I think when you look at Temple, they are a team that can make some noise down the stretch. Their next games, looking at the schedule here, to round out the season, Wichita State, Memphis, Rice, Charlotte. If they don't win those games, I would be shocked. Yeah, maybe Rice will make something happen. Memphis is a team that has beaten some teams randomly throughout the campaign as well. But they should and probably will be favored in all 4 of those games. So if that's the case, you've just beaten UAB and Tulane, played close against South Florida at home, and then you win 6 straight going into the conference tournament. Watch out for Temple. That's a team that to be reckoned with. Defense and rebounding helps win in March, and you're going to see Temple do that. One team that has won in March and knows how to do so and has done so the last couple of years, East Carolina. How about the Pirates starting to figure it out? How about the win in the clutch over UAB and then returned home to play well against Tulsa as well? The Pirates, a team that has gone to the title game each of the last 2 years, as I mentioned at the start of the show, starting to look pretty good as we get closer and closer to Dickies Arena.
Well, here's the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that the great part about conference championships and tournaments is that everybody's got a shot. And I think that teams and players sometimes forget that. So the teams at the top, and not all the teams at the top, but there's a lot of times where they'll show up at Dickies Arena and maybe they're not ready to play that 10 seed or that lower seed, and that team's ready to go. They have one shot. They have nothing to lose. They come and they play some of their best basketball. You just got to get there and put yourself in a good position to play well. And East Carolina has done that. And they're starting to figure things out a little bit more. There's some things that they needed to clean up. They need to be a little bit better with taking care of the basketball. But when I had a chance to catch up with Kim McNeil, she was liking the way that her team is starting to figure things out. She talked about some of those wins. Now, they did have a loss to UTSA in between there, but hey, if you're going to lose to anybody, lose to the team that's beating everybody else, right? And so she spoke about just trying to figure out, okay, like who was going to play the point guard, moving some of her guards around as well. And then also for her, defense was another big thing that she wanted to focus on. They pride themselves on turning people over and just playing very aggressively and being really physical. And you see them doing that as well. And so if we have teams like Temple and we have teams like East Carolina playing these physical brands of basketball, getting in the paint, rebounding, I think not only is the rest of the regular season going to be exciting, Dickies Arena in March is going to be maybe not. We don't want to brawl. We just want very good physical basketball. But East Carolina.
I'm not a member of the conference. I'm just a guest here. I can say that. That sounds fun.
You could say we want no brawls. We want it to be a nice, clean game.
Throw some bows. Let's get after it.
Another big component, though, for the Pirates has been Amiya Joyner. She's been so incredible. And so I think that physical brand of basketball with those big wins, with Amiya Joyner starting to play even better, I think that's a good recipe for success. And that's another thing that Kim McNeil talked about. I asked her, I was like, what makes her so good? And she was like, she is like this tall, physical body. She has so much athleticism. She's quick. She can rebound. She can shoot. She can pretty much do everything that a great basketball player does, and she has this capability to be even better. She said, I don't even think she's reached her ceiling yet, and you take a look at those numbers, that's something that's a little scary when she thinks that she hasn't even reached her ceiling.
Well, and I think you can see that when you watch the Pirates play. Ball handling, you take an uptick there, then all of a sudden she can create for her own shots. She can create her own spacing and positioning as well. Way she rolls off of ball screens, catch and shoot ability is certainly there. She can knock down the outside shot. That would be another added element from Joyner if she can do so. So yeah, I think her ceiling is much higher than what it already has. The consistency on the roster as a whole outside of Joyner is what's going to be the difference maker for East Carolina. You can't have games like they did against Memphis where you get down by double digits early. You have to score your way back into the fold because this team doesn't have the scorers to do that. Joyner is a scorer. Outside of that, it's different players every night, and not a ton of them are really lethal in that element. It has to be right place, right time, right type of ball movement in order to get players open. What you can do if you're East Carolina, what you can continue to build on is the defensive presence. They hang their hat on the defensive side of the ball. They're third in the conference in terms of opponents' points per game. They continue to put up great numbers defensively, and they establish the pace of the game. If they can establish the pace and continue to rock in terms of that element, I think all of a sudden you're talking about a team that is back to where they were a couple years in a row in terms of deep in the tournament. Now, here's the test coming up for East Carolina.
Ooh, it's a big one.
Here's the test.
Study up, kids.
Yes. Over the next 2 weeks, the next 4 games, they have 3 of the top 3 teams coming to, or not coming to, but they're going to face them over those next couple games. They have North Texas going out there to the East Coast. They're going to play North Texas. Then they go on the road against Florida Atlantic. That should be a win for East Carolina if Florida Atlantic keeps playing at the same level that they've been. Then you go at South Florida and then back home against UTSA. So you have North Texas, South Florida, UTSA. The teams we just told you are leading the conference in almost every statistical category and are leading the conference in wins and losses right now. They are the teams that are in the final 4 games of your schedule. Win one of these, great. All right. You're hopefully 500 at that point in the final 4 games. You win 2 of those, and it's like, uh-oh, here comes East Carolina. If you win all 3 of those and somehow win out and win your final 4 games, the whole conference won't just be on notice. They will be scared of East Carolina. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. That's a tough schedule, but I think there's a very good chance that they could win 1 or 2 of the games against UNT, South Florida, or UTSA. Just depends on which one decides to show up. There's my rant for the day.
You done?
No.
Oh,
All right, let's go to Tulane because I'm not done yet. How about the Tulane Green Wave? We've given them a lot of props on this show and what they've done. I don't think I could give them enough props for these jerseys. Look at the Mardi Gras unis that Tulane has been sporting. Of course, proud members of the NOLA community. Oh, man, NOLA built those uniforms.
I want one
phenomenal.
of those. Yeah.
I want one of the men's jerseys too. The white, the all
white looks sick.
The green
too.
is great. Don't get me wrong, but the white is nice. The baseball team had some nice jerseys
too.
too.
The details on it, the Mardi Gras details. I was like, ooh.
Send us jerseys and we'll do a Tulane themed episode.
Yes.
There you go.
I don't think that we can technically say. Well, you could say whatever you want. I can't do that.
Where's
Don't
the
send
address?
us anything, please.
It's
send it
blank,
directly
blank,
to
blank,
Kyle.
Blank is the address. I actually almost gave out the address, but that probably
yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. We would have had to bleep that out. But anyway,
we're not doing it.
We're not going to do that. One thing that we don't have to bleep out though is talking well of the Tulane Green Wave because their uniforms have been incredible with the Mardi Gras lining, and they have been very good as well. That was a team that we really didn't talk about too much coming into the season. Now, one thing is they have faltered in their last 2 games, but they were against better opponents. They lose to North Texas. They lose to a Temple team that's playing well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give them passes on that. They beat Rice, who Rice has the potential to be good. And then they also beat UAB, who was kind of giving some other teams some problems. So I'm going to give it to Tulane. Those last 2 losses, they need to figure some things out, but overall, I'm still excited about where this team is headed.
And remember, they beat those 2 teams the first time around, too.
Exactly.
North Texas and Temple. Does that mean, since they lost the second matchup, that the first 2 were a fluke? No, that's not what it means. They're still really talented. North Texas, they got off to a slow start, played better. It actually was really in that game down the stretch. They, like I said earlier, they got out to score 24-5 in the first quarter, and the fact that it was a 1-possession, 2-possession ball game in the fourth, they got North Texas into some foul trouble, started playing better across the board. They're a tough matchup. They really are, and I think North Texas, a team that I just talked about, being one of the more better built teams in the conference, they've struggled to combat what Tulane brings. And that's a credit to the entire coaching staff. That's a credit to what they've built on the campus in New Orleans with Ashley Langford in her first season, because they are a scary team. Now, are they consistent enough for me to really look at them and say they're a troublemaker? Probably not, because they got destroyed on the rebounds against Temple. And I just talked about the way that I've liked Temple's rebounding as of late and how they've had some success. They beat them by 20 on the rebounding in that category, close to 20, 54-37. Molina and Turner from Temple had 26 rebounds on their own compared to the 37 as a team for Tulane. You can't do that. You can't shoot from 28% from the field like they did against Temple. All but one starter was in single digits, and then you had Keenan, who's kind of an X-factor player, was scoreless as well. They have 4 players that average in double figures. Games like that should not be possible, should not be a possibility. Find somebody else that can step up, because they score. They absolutely score. They're still a team that's right now in the top 3 of the conference in points per game. Make it feel like that. Don't have the ups and the downs like you've had, and then all of a sudden we can talk about this team being legitimate. Where do you see this team getting better as they get into March? Is there a spot where you feel like they can take a step forward?
Yeah, so I think, honestly, to your point, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit by answering my question.
Nice.
Just in the fact that I agree with you in the sense of, yes, they have to do better on the boards. They have to do better playing defense. When they get out-rebounded by Temple, by that much.
I don't think they're bad on defense.
But to answer your question and what I was thinking about as you were talking is, I just chalk that up to like a singular bad game. The fact that they have 4 players averaging double figures, I think that is going to be their ticket to be successful in March.
Okay.
I think they need to be consistent in scoring, and I think that they have the capability to do that. Because here's the thing, yes, in that Temple game, no, the offense didn't do what it needed to. I don't see that happening again. This is a game of averages and numbers, right? I don't see them playing that poorly again. So I think that they're going to be able to ride that offense. They're going to be able to have people like Sharice Pittman and Amiya Mabry score where they need them to. And I just think that for them to be successful in the tournament and in March, they need to rely on those players that do average in double figures and maybe get some help from 1 or 2 other people. Defensively, that's not their main thing. It's not like a Temple where they're going to base every one of their keys on defense, right? That hasn't been their complete identity this entire season.
Yeah.
So do what you do best, score the basketball, and then play good defense. You don't have to try to be something that you're not. I just want to see you play good enough defense where you're making a good effort on the board and at least staying in the game and rely on your offense. Again, most coaches will tell you that defense wins championships. We talked about it when we're talking about UTSA, but if that's not your game, rely on the offense and take that into March.
Yeah, I think there's parts of your theory and your thought process here that I do agree with, and I want to build on it a little bit because you mentioned Mabry and Pittman. Those are both forwards that are very talented and they can do a whole lot of things right. I think either way they're going to score and they're going to have their fill of points and production and whatever that may come. I think you got to have better guard play. Their guard play is where I've had some inconsistencies from a production side. Like I said, I don't think they're bad on the defensive end of the floor. I think Mabry and Pittman are both better suited to score. I think that's just kind of the type of skill set that they bring to the table. But I think your scoring from your guards got to be better. Look at the key wins that they've had this year. Whittington put up 28 points against UAB. You need that. You can't have her in single digits. Sneed put up 16 points against Temple. Oh, by the way, Whittington also had 15 points in that game against Temple as well. Both had over 14 points against Rice. But you go and look at the games where they've lost, they've been held in check. They've been held to 4 points, 5 points, 0 of 6 shooting, 1 of 7 shooting. There have been times where they've had those stat lines. If you get the consistency that you've already been getting from Mabry and Pittman, but then you add in a couple of those guards that can hold their own day in and day out, game in and game out, that's when we're going to see the Green Wave get closer and closer to making at least a statement that they are one of the top 4 teams. Because right now, I think the race is between Temple and Tulane. That's the race, and they've each won a game. Yep. So that's the race to be the 4 seed and to go straight to the quarterfinals, as we talked about UTSA doing earlier. I think right now it's UTSA, South Florida, North Texas as the 3. I know North Texas could probably be caught there too. I just don't see it with their remaining schedule. I think they're going to win the majority of their games remaining. And if that's the case, they'll be the 3 seed. Temple and Tulane, you got to close out the season strong, or else you're going to have to earn your way into the quarterfinals, which they could certainly do, but you don't want to put yourself in that position. Tulane's final 4 games, Tulsa, Wichita State, at home against the UTSA. I think they could win that game. And then at UAB. Those are the 4 games that they've got back as well. And they had a possible reschedule against South Florida, too, that you can keep in mind later on. That could be a game that could be the X factor on whether or not they are the 4 seed or not. So that's a huge one down the line. I like this Tulane team. I like the way that they're built. I want to see more out of the guard play against the top-level competition before I can really tab them as one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the conference.
I can get on board with you on that one.
Thank you.
So disagree, but also agree at the same time.
Let me say something about this next team.
Okay.
You can agree or disagree with me, or just plead the fifth since you're a conference employee. Outside of Rice, I think Tulsa might be the most disappointing team in the regular season so far.
I'm going to plead the fifth.
Okay, but hold on. Here's the thing. I know we got a lot of Tulsa fans that are listening to the show, and they're probably like, I hate this guy. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Send him angry tweets. I'll do it on my burner.
You won't want to send me angry tweets after I talk about this. I'm not giving up on them yet. Okay. They've been the most disappointing team outside of Rice. I think that's pretty clear. They were picked to finish 2nd. They're currently in 9th. Tulsa was picked to finish 4th. They're currently in 7th. And a team that helped to a share of the conference regular season title last year, not playing very well. I think they're the fourth or fifth most talented team in the conference when you talk about their roster, Crawford and what she brings to the table, the coaching staff, what they bring to the table. I like this team as a talent top to bottom, but they can't win the big games. I thought they would win one of the big games, Maria, one of them.
I know.
But their most impressive conference win right now is probably, I don't know, East Carolina.
Right.
And East Carolina in the opener of the season, they've got wins in conference play over East Carolina, Memphis, Charlotte, Florida Atlantic, Wichita State. That's it. ECU, Memphis, Charlotte, Florida Atlantic, Wichita State. If you might catch a common trend here, they're all 8th or below in the American standings. And I think that's shocking to me when I look at this team and I look at Tulsa and I look at how talented and well coached they are. They're disciplined too. They really are when they have a shot, but they still haven't won those big games.
Well, I mean, I think the game against North Texas most recently is just a prime example of that because they were in that game the entire time. Delanie Crawford makes a huge shot towards the end of that game just to keep it going. And so you have faith for the Golden Hurricane, and then they just can't figure out how to close it out. And so I'll agree with you to that point as well. I mean, I feel like even Tulsa fans are probably like a little bit bummed out about this because of the way that they were picked to finish and where they are right now. Now, I will say they do some things well. I mean, they take a lot of three-pointers. They don't maybe make quite as many as they should, but they kind of know their identity in that. And that kind of goes back to my point that I was saying about Tulane. That's your game, and that's the hill you're going to die on. Hopefully that works out for you in the postseason. So I think that there are some disappointments within the season. I still, though, have faith for this Golden Hurricane team because I'm going to go back to what I said earlier in the show of just March is weird. Like, it's not called March Madness for any old reason. It's weird. They've won in the postseason before, so can they figure out how to get back there? And I think, just to my point about the three-pointers as well, they're taking a lot of those shots. What if they get hot in the tournament? What if they just start making everything? And I think that could be a game changer. It's hard to defend when people are making threes at the logo or taking as many and getting those good looks. Now, to flip it back on Tulsa, how are you going to make them more in the postseason or in these next couple of games as opposed to what you've been doing all season long?
That's my question. And these numbers are significant because, the percentage right there, that percentage is not great, right? That's 31%. You got to just hit at a higher shot. I think they're talented enough to make those shots, which is why I think they are a team that is one of the top 4 or 5 most talented teams. They've had some rough stretches shooting. If they get hot at the right time, and plain and simple, it's just better looks, the more discipline whenever you're taking these shot attempts. Don't force up these ill-advised shots when you get to it. If you can hit at a higher clip in the tournament, all of a sudden I think we're talking about Tulsa as a team that will beat one or two of these teams. They're going to have to come from the lower side of the bracket. They're not going to be one of those top 4 teams. They can't get there physically to get up there into the top 4 seeds. But when you look at them as a top 5 team, because they're one of 5 teams in the conference that ranks inside the top 8 in both scoring and scoring defense. You want to know the other teams that are inside that 5 list?
Let's hear it.
UTSA, UNT, South Florida, Tulane.
Not a bad combination.
Anything stick out to you there?
Kind of in the top half of the conference.
That's the number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 5 team in the conference right now.
Right.
So Tulsa's kind of that. It's almost like they're an imposter, but on the opposite side. They're just like, we're lurking. We're right here. We're standing tall.
I know,
I love that.
You love that
saying.
lurking, but that's more about the Tigers.
That was about the Memphis Tigers in football. This is about the Golden Hurricane in women's basketball. They're right there, ready to strike when the iron is hot. And I think you're going to see this team get hot at the right time. The final 4 games, I've been outlining it for a lot of these teams. I think that's a common theme going down the stretch. UAB, South Florida, Memphis, Wichita State. Good chance they finish 3-1, 2-2, 4-0 to end the season like that. That South Florida game I'm going to circle, and we're going to have a schedule of games coming up here in a couple of minutes where we're looking at the games ahead. I'm going to circle that game. I want Tulsa to win that game. Not because I'm cheering for Tulsa. Don't get me wrong. I'm not cheering for Tulsa. But if I'm the Golden Hurricane, I'm saying the same thing that I said at the beginning of this segment when talking about Tulsa. They have not won a single big conference game. The best win they have so far is against ECU. UAB would surpass that. If they beat UAB this week, that would be their best conference win. If they beat South Florida, that would be their best conference win. I want them to go out there and take that game from South Florida. Not because, like I said, I'm not cheering against the Bulls, anything. I just want to see Tulsa play better basketball because I think they have it within them and that skill set, talent top to bottom, to get it done and to challenge some of these top teams.
Yeah, some of that talent comes from Delanie Crawford. We've talked about her a lot on this show, and I think we even mentioned her in those games where they are close, right? In the way that she's been able to make an impact on games. She's finding ways to score, and she does it really well, too, when other players get involved. And so I think that just goes back to the same point that we've been making this entire time we've been talking about Tulsa, is they have to make more of those shots at a higher clip. They have to get more people scoring. They have to clean some of those things up. Delanie Crawford is doing everything that she can to put this team in a position to be successful in March, but now she just needs some help from some other players.
Yeah, she's going to continue, kind of like what I talked about earlier. She's going to continue to put up elite numbers. She's a first-team all-conference player. She'll continue to do that. She just needs the help around her. I think Angie Nelp knows. I've had conversations with Coach Nelp. She knows that they have to play better around her. But they have some high-level transfers. I know Paige Bradley from TCU has had a solid season. Jade Clack has been in and out of the lineup, and they would love to have her kind of steady there too. There's a lot here when it comes to Tulsa, and it all starts with Delanie Crawford. If she's there, that's where you start it, and then build off of that. And I think that's a pretty good starting spot across the board.
Now, you talked about the matchup between Tulsa and South Florida, but another one that we want to circle is probably that Tulsa UAB matchup. So let's talk a little bit about the Blazers, because you were pretty high on them a couple weeks ago when we chatted, and the way that they were starting to put it together a little bit. But now they just lost their last game. Can they rebound from that? And if so, what's it going to take?
Well, they've lost 3 of their last 4 too, and that's where a lot of that I give credit to the other teams that they've played. I mean, they lost to Temple, who we gave praise to earlier, lost to East Carolina, who we gave praise to earlier, and same thing with Tulane, who was the team that beat them the first time around. I think when you look at this UAB team and you look at how they're built with the veteran returners, and we've kind of hit some of those names on this show before, I want to see that level of consistency that we were accustomed to seeing earlier in the conference slate. I just don't know where I'm at with this UAB team. I really don't, because and I don't know if they know where they're at. I don't know if Randy Norton knows at this point, because right now they're not playing great defense. They're average 10th in the American in terms of points per game allowed. A team that, of course, won 9 games in the American schedule last year. I think they'd be hard-pressed to get back to that point this year, but they're putting up some good numbers. They go up and they get up and down the floor. They play at one of the higher pace of plays in the American, and because of that, you're going to give up points. It's just the balance you got to find with players like Weathersby and some of the others that have made an impact before.
Well, I know we talked about it a little bit before, but the upcoming schedule, I think, is something that can play in their favor as well, because they have Tulsa, which we just talked about. They're trying to figure things out. They can win that game. Rice, another team that has the potential to be good, but again, trying to figure their things out as well. That North Texas game is tough, and the Tulane game is tough. But like you said before, I mean, they're tough matchups, but I look at it from the perspective of, if you can win those tough matchups, I think that builds confidence heading into the tournament. I always think about how I would frame it to players, or as a player, how I would frame things, because you got to talk yourself into like some crazy stuff. Like, I think we had the conversation weeks ago how, like, when we would play a conference series when I was in college, I would like when we would like lose a game to like our opponent, because I was like, no, I don't want to sweep them, because you know how hard it is to beat a team 4 times. So if I'm UAB and I see this upcoming schedule and we lose a couple of those games,
you're thinking, let's just lose out.
I'm not thinking that.
Okay,
let me finish. I'm
okay,
like,
so
okay. I'm like, okay, like this is how I would spin it in my head. Okay, like this is great because now that we lost to them now, we're going to beat them in the tournament. That's how my mind works. But
I hate that.
I know that you hate that. But my goal as a player would be like, okay, let's sweep these last couple games and let's continue that momentum as we head into the postseason.
Every coach that like watches this show is going to be like, Maria, why?
Listen, you didn't listen to the second part of my point.
I'm listening, I promise.
The goal is to sweep these last couple games, take the momentum into the tournament. But you got to lie to yourself when you lose a game, because then if you don't sweep, you're going to be like, oh man, we don't have momentum going into the tournament. No, then it's, oh, this just means that we're going to beat them later on when we get to those games that are more important. It's all about how you spin it. One thing that isn't about how you spin, though, is the way that Jade Weathersby has been playing, because she is the one stalwart of this UAB team that has been very good. So I think
you think she likes to lose games?
No, I don't like to lose anything. Like I literally will beat like a 5-year-old in a race if it means that there's something on the line, which is probably not good of me. I don't like to lose, but it's about how you spin it. And I just went on a way too long tangent, and I think you need to take it from here, because UAB fans don't want to listen to me saying that they need to lose games. That's not what I'm saying. Stop talking.
No, they do not want that. They're 6th in the conference right now. They've actually overachieved if you look at the preseason poll. They were 9th going into it. And I think a lot of that overachieving is because of the returning experience that they have on the roster, whether it's Maddie Walsh or Armstead or Weathersby, Burschers, all of those players, I think outside of Armstead, have been around. Jade Weathersby's been the one that has really set the tone recently. Look at what she's done, just putting up some numbers.
This is where I was trying to go with this.
This is where you were headed?
Yeah,
I believe you.
Yeah, we just took a detour to get there.
That was a long detour. When you look at the games that they've been losing, of course, they've lost 3 out of the last 4. It's not been because of Jade Weathersby having down days. If anything, she's taken her game to another level, put up 22 against ECU, 27 against Charlotte, and then put up a double-double in a loss against Temple. She's taking that step forward. What's happening is they've not gotten the guard play to kind of counteract that.
And that was something that you stated, I think, probably in one of our first episodes, that guard play was going to be key. And not only the guard play, but the veteranship on this roster, because there are players who have been around for a bit that know how this offense can operate if they do it correctly. And so I think that exactly what you said, there's other players around her. You need the guard play, and you also need that leadership to step up so that Weathersby has some help, because if not, you take Weathersby away at this point for UAB and there's not much else around her. There's the possibility. We've seen others play really well and score at a high clip, but just not right now.
And that's where you've got to find it. That's where you've got to find Walsh and Armstead, because in those same games that we're talking about, Weathersby putting up a significant number of points. You see Walsh held to 7 points against ECU. They lost that game. Held to 5 points against Temple. They lost that game. So that's about as good as it comes. I mean, the game that they won, she put up 20 points against Charlotte. If you have the guard play to counteract what Weathersby is starting to figure out and click, then you're meshing it all together, and then all of a sudden we've got good guard play, good play in the post, and you can kind of build from there, and that's what UAB is trying to do as the season goes on. All right, we've got some big games coming up in the American over the next couple of weeks. No reason for a detour here. We're going straight into it. North Texas and East Carolina. That's going to be a fun one. The Pirates have been playing some really good basketball as of late. You wanted to circle Tulsa and UAB.
Yes,
I certainly am right there with you. I think that'll be fun. And then there's always something about a team that is underachieved. I mentioned the Rice Owls earlier. They were, in my opinion, and if you're a fan of Rice, you can try and disagree with me, but it's part of the expectations I had for the Owls. They've been the most disappointing team on the women's side in the American this year. They've got a chance to fix a little bit of that at home at Tudor Fieldhouse against their in-state rival, UTSA. Am I allowed to put UTSA on upset alert even after we talked as highly as we did about them?
You can do whatever you want. You're not an employee of the conference.
Upset alert. UTSA and Rice, you heard it here first. Let's see if it happens or not. If not, UTSA is so good. They're going to go on the road against Tulane, too. They're going to have some.
That one.
That's a fun one.
Yeah.
Tulsa, South Florida. Speaking of upset alert, I think you can maybe say that's another opportunity for one there. And then, of course, down there at the bottom, that East Carolina, South Florida game has me intrigued as well as another kind of rivalry matchup that's been brewing over the last couple of years between some of the better teams in the conference. So a couple of notable games to keep an eye on as we continue forward throughout this schedule across the board. Now, you've got one of the best players in the conference joining you as well, right, Maria?
Oh, yeah. We got to talk to Tommisha Lampkin, and she was phenomenal.
Tally for three, no good. Lampkin with the rebound and the foul.
Boy, I'll tell you what, she is as good as it gets, and she's the difference here today. You give her another opportunity, and she's going to make you pay, and she did that right there with a bucket and one.
Tommisha Lampkin joins All-American now. Tommisha, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to chat with you today.
Thanks for having me. Welcome.
So one of my favorite parts of that clip that we just watched is your emotion after you make that big play. What do you think it is when you are on the court, when you have so much emotion? Where does that come from?
It just comes from my love from the sport, and I like to play with emotion. I don't like nonchalant players. It's more fun to watch. It's more enjoyable to me and when I'm playing with emotion.
Well, it certainly looks like you're having fun. You've been having fun all season. Your North Texas team has been fantastic. But in particular right now, you are peaking, I think, at the right time. Let's talk about you individually. What do you think it is right now that has your game being so good?
We're getting close to March, and these my last couple months in the North Texas uniform, so I got to take full advantage right now. I also have goals that I'm reaching and records that I'm reaching to break right now. So that's my main focus as we end the season.
I love that. We'll talk a little bit more about you. Let's talk about some of the records, too, that this North Texas team has had in the last couple of years under Coach Burton. What do you think has allowed you all to click so well, especially this season?
That's our buy-in. Everybody coming in and knowing what he expects of us and just executing it to our full potential. Also, like our culture as a team, we don't come in here and take anything light, and it's showing every game.
Where do you think that culture and that buy-in originally came from? Like, when did it actually start flowing together? Like, okay, we're all going to do this. We're all going to come together and be successful in the way that we are right now.
When we started actually playing and we realized how good we could be, because in the summer we were still kind of trying to find ourselves and each other, learn each other. But we started playing and we realized, oh, this team can actually be special. That made the buy-in even more impactful.
Your team is right near the top of the American Conference. Those couple top three teams, UTSA, South Florida, all fighting for that top spot as we get closer to the tournament. What's it going to take for you to ultimately get there and then have a good performance in that American Conference tournament?
Just everybody continuing to stay locked in and continuing to buy into whatever we're being coached on, just being coachable and looking for one another in game.
Now let's go back to you individually. You had 29 points against Tulsa. You're one of the top scorers in the American Athletic Conference. And you mentioned some of those individual goals that you have for yourself. What have you done in the last couple of years just to continuously try to reach those goals, reach those records, and eventually shatter them?
I just focus on being a better me every year and breaking my own records first, and I feel like the rest will come, which it has.
What goes into being a better you?
Not taking days off or not settling, okay, I had 29, I can chill now. No, I got to keep going regardless of what my numbers look like or how anybody else thinks I'm playing.
So one thing I think that's been really fun to watch as well, I mean, you mentioned the buy-in, you mentioned the way that the team has come together, but when you talk about that culture, I think from an outsider's perspective, you can see that the way that you guys just work together as a team, the way that you overcome deficits, the way that the offense has been clicking, especially I think you had over 60 points in that second half against Memphis. So for you, when you say, oh, our culture is really good, what does that mean? What exactly is North Texas's basketball culture?
Premium gas, that's our culture. That's us being tough and together. If we not tough work together. I don't think North Texas culture is what it is, and everybody buying into that every day, every game. That's what the outsiders see, and that's Texas culture.
I love that. And I think it comes from the top down as well. And you mentioned Coach Burton. What kind of impact has he had on this program in the years that you've been there?
He came in just believing in all of his players, and I feel like that's what makes us buy into what he's saying the most, because we know that he has the utmost confidence in us, and he knows that him having that confidence in us will make us want to run through a wall for him. So that's what we try and do every game.
Certainly looks like you're trying to run through some walls. Last question for you, Tommisha. You have just a couple of games left before the postseason. How do you lock in these last few matches?
I don't take opponents lightly, me or my team, and I just keep trying to work on ways to get better and doing what has worked for me up to this point.
Well, that is awesome. We're excited to watch you play in these last couple of games. Tommisha, thank you so much for joining All-American today.
Thank you for having me.
Tommisha Lampkin, you've had the pleasure of calling a lot of her games in the past couple of years, and as advertised on camera as she is on the court as well.
She's just so good at what she does, and the game that's grown from a player that was already a first-team all-conference caliber player last year, of course, preseason player of the year this year, and she's just taking her game to another level. And we talked earlier in the show about how she will continue to stay consistent, talented, lethal, whatever you want to call it. She is as good as advertised, and she's going to be really the straw that stirs the drink for North Texas come March. And I love hearing about her background, her story. Of course, I've gotten to know her family over the last couple of years as well. She's as good as they come, and really has been a joy. I think and I've said this on the ESPN broadcast, but I think there needs to start being conversation to be the third number retired by North Texas women's basketball. Yeah. And I don't think anybody else should wear the number 24, especially if they get to the NCAA tournament. They get to the big dance this year, and she takes Jason Burton's squad to the level that they want to reach. I think you're going to see her name up in the rafters at the Super Pit when it's all said and done.
Awesome. I'll be the first one in attendance to watch that.
You want to sign that petition for me?
I'll get on that train for sure, because
Sweet.
She has been so incredible. Kind of like our top plays that we have.
Yeah.
It was tough picking them. We could only choose 5, but we'll start off with this one. That's Tony. Just completely pins that ball off the backboard. It looks like South Florida's going to get 2 points, but nope, not today.
Tony. Best name in all of sports. Best name in all of college basketball. And he has one of the best blocks as well. I like it. Tony getting the job done. And that UAB team continues to be legitimate. They continue to win some games. All right, I want to go down to the wire. Tulsa women's basketball at home against North Texas. They needed a shot late. They got one from Delanie Crawford. We talked about how good of a shooter she is. How about this? Off of the screen in the corner, ice cold with a defender all over her. Doesn't matter. She drills it. Unfortunately for Tulsa, they fall in this matchup. North Texas wins it up at the Reynolds Center.
I love that she still makes that after being thrown to the ground.
Yeah.
Swish again. Still loses the game, but she has been so good. Speaking of things that are so good, I love talking about outfield defense.
It's back.
It's back.
Baseball is back.
Baseball is back, along with catches like this. Jackson Mayo diving on an angle. Look how calm, cool, and collected he is after that. He's like, no biggie. Just made a game-saving catch, but it's fine.
Would you say that's a little Mayo with your catch up?
Haha, that's why you're a father. That was a dad joke. Let's
Thank
go
you.
to our next play.
What a play from South Florida baseball. I want to talk about a little bit of basketball. Tulane getting it done on the block and the steal and the finish at the buzzer. It was good from Woods. How about that to win it? They get it done not only with the offensive play and the shot at the buzzer at Devlin Fieldhouse, but it was all set up by that initial block to get it done. I also love how Ron Hunter's son, R.J. Hunter, who had a 9-year NBA career, this is his first year as a coach on the Tulane staff, was the first one to sprint across the court and hug Woods after he knocked down a crazy shot to get it done.
I love the hug. This one was featured on SportsCenter as well. This was insane. ice cold in Asher Woods' veins to drain that shot. And speaking of ice cold, somebody else we already talked about on this show a lot. Now, stop me if you've seen this before, because you have. But when Sammie Puisis makes shots like that, it has to be our number one play, because she made not one, Kyle, but two ice-cold shots. And here's the second one. This one, as we said before, from the logo.
Oh, my goodness. Once again, we were watching this live. This was as good of a duo 1-2 punch as you could have asked for. Puisis, if they don't make the shot at the end of regulation, which is why we put them both together, if that shot isn't made at the end of regulation, Rice has a huge upset over South Florida. But then you get back into third overtime. We get 3 overtimes to go all the way down to the wire. It's tight again at the end, and Puisis says, "Don't worry, guys. I know I'm standing on top of the horns of a bull from midcourt, but I'm going to drill this shot with a first-team all-conference member in front of me and Malia Fisher. Doesn't matter. Sammie Puisis, ice cold down there in Tampa, Florida. Incredible 1-2 punch. The shot at the end of regulation and the shot to win it in triple OT.
She's a big reason why the Bulls are running. The running of the Bulls. I think we used
and
that.
That's a dad joke, too.
That one, no, that one's a cooler one.
Ketchup and mayo was phenomenal.
I think we have to put it to the viewers.
Yes, comment which one was worse along the way is definitely mine, but that's fine. Part of it. Maria, always fun talking some hoops, and we've got some men's hoops to talk about next time. The next time we're talking about the women's game, we're going into tournament week.
Oh my God.
Can you believe that?
No.
We got one more regular season episode, and then we're talking postseason.
That's wild.
That is crazy. Lots still to be decided in the American Athletic Conference. For Zach and Chris in the back, for Maria Trivelpiece, I'm Kyle Youmans. We'll see you next time with more All-American from Studio A.